Relax and listen to the voice. Welcome back once again to the fairy tales of Hans Christian Andersen. This is volume 25. Please like this video. Please share this to your social media to help get the word out about our channel. Please subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And please enjoy. With that, here we go. The Philosopher's Stone. Far away, towards the east, in India, which seemed in those days the world's end, stood the tree of the sun, a noble tree such as we have never seen, and perhaps never may see. The summit of this tree spread itself for miles, like an entire forest, each of its smaller branches forming a complete tree. Palms, beech trees, pines, plane trees, and various other kinds, which are found in all parts of the world, were here like small branches shooting forth from the great tree, while the larger boughs, with their knots and curves, formed valleys and hills, clothed with velvety green and covered with flowers. Everywhere it was like a blooming meadow or a lovely garden. Here were birds from all quarters of the world assembled together. Birds from the primeval forests of America, from the rose gardens of Damascus, and from the deserts of Africa, in which the elephant and the lion may boast of being the only rulers. Birds from the polar regions came flying here, and of course the stork and the swallow were not absent. But the birds were not the only living creatures. There were stags, squirrels, antelopes, and hundreds of other beautiful and light-footed animals here found a home. The summit of the tree was a wide-spreading garden, and in the midst of it, where the green boughs formed a kind of hill, stood a castle of crystal, with a view from it towards every quarter of heaven. Each tower was erected in the form of a lily, and within the stern was a winding staircase through which one could ascend to the top and step out upon the leaves as upon balconies. The calyx of the flower itself formed a most beautiful, glittering, circular hall, above which no other roof arose than the blue firmament and the sun and stars. Just as much splendor, but of another kind, appeared below, in the wide halls of the castle. Here, on the walls, were reflected pictures of the world, which represented numerous and varied scenes of everything that took place daily, so that it was useless to read the newspapers, and indeed there were none to be obtained in this spot. All was to be seen in living pictures by those who wished it, but all would have been too much for even the wisest man, and this man dwelt here. His name is very difficult. You would not be able to pronounce it, so it may be omitted. He knew everything that a man on earth can know or imagine. Every invention already in existence or yet to be was known to him, and much more. Still, everything on earth has a limit. The wise King Solomon was not half so wise as this man. He could govern the powers of nature and held sway over potent spirits. Even death itself was obliged to give him every morning a list of those who were to die during the day. And King Solomon himself had to die at last, and this fact it was which so often occupied the thoughts of this great man in the castle on the tree of the sun. He knew that he also, however high he might tower above other men in wisdom, must one day die. He knew that his children would fade away like the leaves of the forest and become dust. He saw the human race wither and fall like leaves from the tree. He saw the new men come to fill their places, but the leaves that fell off never sprouted forth again. They crumbled to dust or were absorbed into other plants. "What happens to man," asked the wise man of himself, "when touched by the angel of death? What can death be? The body decays, and the soul. Yes, what is the soul, and whither does it go?" "To eternal life," says the comforting voice of religion. "But what is this change? Where and how shall we exist?" "Above, in heaven," answers the pious man. "It is there we hope to go." "Above, above," repeated the wise man, fixing his eyes upon the moon and stars above him. He saw that to this earthly sphere, above and below, were constantly changing places, and that the position varied according to the spot on which a man found himself. He knew also that even if he ascended to the top of the highest mountain which rears its lofty summit on this earth, the air, which to us seems clear and transparent, would there be dark and cloudy. The sun would have a coppery glow and send forth no rays, and our earth would lie beneath him wrapped in an orange-colored mist. How narrow are the limits which confine the bodily sight, and how little can be seen by the eye of the soul. How little do the wisest among us know of that which is so important to us all. In the most secret chamber of the castle lay the greatest treasure on earth, the Book of Truth. The wise man had read it through, page after page. Every man may read in this book, but only in fragments. To many eyes, the characters seem so mixed in confusion that the words cannot be distinguished. On certain pages, the writing often appears so pale or so blurred that the page becomes blank. The wiser a man becomes, the more he will read, and those who are the wisest read the most. The wise man knew how to unite the sunlight and the moonlight with the light of reason and the hidden powers of nature, and through this stronger light, many things in the pages were made clear to him. But in the portion of the book entitled Life After Death, not a single point could he see distinctly. This pained him. Should he never be able, here on earth, to obtain a light by which everything written in the Book of Truth should become clear to him? Like the wise King Solomon, he understood the language of animals and could interpret their talk into song, but that made him none the wiser. He found out the nature of plants and metals and their power in curing diseases and arresting death, but none to destroy death itself. In all created things within his reach, he sought the light that should shine upon the certainty of an eternal life, but he found it not. The Book of Truth lay open before him, but its pages were to him as blank paper. Christianity placed before him in the Bible a promise of eternal life, but he wanted to read it in his book, in which nothing on the subject appeared to be written. He had 5 children, 4 sons, educated as the children of such a wise father should be, and a daughter, fair, gentle, and intelligent, but she was blind. Yet this deprivation appeared as nothing to her. Her father and brothers were outward eyes to her, and a vivid imagination made everything clear to her in mental sight. The sons had never gone farther from the castle than the branches of the trees extended, and the sister had scarcely ever left home. They were happy children in that home of their childhood, the beautiful, fragrant tree of the sun. Like all children, they loved to hear stories related to them, and their father told them many things in which other children would not have understood. but these were as clever as most grown-up people among us. He explained to them what they saw in the pictures of life on the castle walls, the doings of man, and the progress of events in all the lands of the earth. And the sons often expressed a wish that they could be present and take a part in these great deeds. Then their father told them that in the world there was nothing but toil and difficulty, that it was not quite what it appeared to them as they looked upon it in their beautiful home. He spoke to them of the true, the beautiful, and the good, and told them that these three held together in the world, and by that union they became crystallized into a precious jewel, clearer than a diamond of the first water, a jewel whose splendor had a value even in the sight of God, in whose brightness all things dim. This jewel was called the Philosopher's Stone. He told them that, by searching, man could attain to a knowledge of the existence of God, and that it was in the power of every man to discover the certainty that such a jewel as the Philosopher's Stone really existed. This information would have been beyond the perception of other children, but these children understood, and others will learn to comprehend its meaning after a time. They questioned their father about the true, the beautiful, and the good, and he explained it to them in many ways. He told them that God, when he made man out of the dust of the earth, touched his work 5 times, leaving 5 intense feelings, which we call the 5 senses. Through these, the true, the beautiful, and the good are seen, understood, and perceived, and through these they are valued, protected, and encouraged. 5 senses had been given mentally and corporeally, inwardly and outwardly, to body and soul. The children thought deeply on all these things and meditated upon them day and night. Then the eldest of the brothers dreamt a splendid dream. Strange to say, not only the second brother, but also the third and fourth brothers all dreamt exactly the same thing, namely, that each went out into the world to find the Philosopher's Stone. Each dreamt that he'd found it, and that, as he rode back on his swift horse in the morning dawn over the velvety green meadows to his home in the castle of his father, that the stone gleamed from his forehead like a beaming light, and threw such a bright radiance upon the pages of the Book of Truth that every word was illuminated which spoke of the life beyond the grave. But the sister had no dream of going out into the wide world. It never entered her mind. Her world was her father's house. "I shall ride forth into the wide world," said the eldest brother. "I must try what life is like there, as I mix with men. I will practice only the good and true, and with these I will protect the beautiful. Much shall be changed for the better while I am there." Now these thoughts were great and daring, as our thoughts generally are at home, before we have gone out into the world and encountered its storms and tempests, its thorns and its thistles. In him and in all his brothers the 5 senses were highly cultivated, inwardly and outwardly, but each of them had one sense which in keenness and development surpassed the other 4. In the case of the eldest, this preeminent sense was sight, which he hoped would be of special service. He had eyes for all times and all people, eyes that could discover in the depths of the earth hidden treasures, and look into the hearts of men as through a pane of glass. He could read more than is often seen on the cheek that blushes or grows pale, in the eye that stoops or smiles. Stags and antelopes accompanied him to the western boundary of his home, and there he found the wild swans. These he followed, and found himself far away in the north, far from the land of his father, which extended eastward to the ends of the earth. How he opened his eyes with astonishment! How many things were to be seen here, and so different to the mere representation of pictures such as those in his father's house. At first, he nearly lost his eyes in astonishment at the rubbish and mockery brought forward to represent the beautiful. But he kept his eyes, and soon found full employment for them. He wished to go thoroughly and honestly to work in his endeavor to understand the true, the beautiful, and the good. But how were they represented in the world? He observed that the wreath which rightly belonged to the beautiful was often given the hideous, and that the good was often passed by unnoticed, while mediocrity was applauded when it should have been hissed. People tend to look at the dress, not at the wearer, thought more of a name than of doing their duty, and trusted more to reputation than to real service. It was everywhere the same. "I see I must make a regular attack on these things," said he, and he accordingly did not spare them. But while looking for the truth came the evil one, the father of lies, to intercept him. Gladly would the fiend have plucked out the eyes of this seer, but that would have been too straightforward a path for him. He works more cunningly. He allowed the young man to seek for and discover the beautiful and the good, but while he was contemplating them, the evil spirit blew one mote after another into each of his eyes, and such a proceeding would injure even the strongest sight. Then he blew upon the motes, and they became beams, so that the clearness of his sight was gone, and the seer was like a blind man in the world, and had no longer any faith in it. He had lost his good opinion of the world, as well as of himself. And when a man gives up the world, and himself too, it is all over with him. "All over," said the wild swan, who flew across the sea to the east. "All over," twittered the swallows, who were also flying eastward towards the tree of the sun. It was no good news which they carried home. "I think the seer has been badly served," said the second brother, "but the hearer may be more successful." This one possessed the sense of hearing to a very high degree. So acute was this sense that it was said he could hear the grass grow. He took a fond leave of all at home and rode away, provided with good abilities and good intentions. The swallows escorted him, and he followed the swans till he found himself out in the world and far away from home. But he soon discovered that one may have too much of a good thing. His hearing was too fine. He not only heard the grass grow, but could hear every man's heart beat, whether in sorrow or in joy. The whole world was to him like a clockmaker's great workshop, in which all the clocks were going tick, tick, and all the turret clocks striking ding dong. It was unbearable. For a long time his ears endured it, but at last all the noise and tumult became too much for one man to bear. There were rascally boys of 60 years old, for years do not alone make a man, who raised a tumult which might have made the hearer laugh but for the applause which followed, echoing through every street and house, and was even heard in country roads. Falsehood thrust itself forward and played the hypocrite. The bells on the fool's cap jingled and declared they were church bells, and the noise became so bad for the hearer that he thrust his fingers into his ears. Still, he could hear false notes and bad singing, gossip and idle words, scandal and slander, groaning and moaning without and within. Heaven help us! He thrust his fingers farther and farther into his ears, till at last the drums burst. And now he could hear nothing more of the true, the beautiful, and the good, for his hearing was to have been the means by which he hoped to acquire his knowledge. He became silent and suspicious, and at last trusted no one, not even himself. and no longer hoping to find and bring home the costly jewel, he gave it up, and gave himself up too, which was worse than all. The birds in their flight towards the east carried the tidings, and the news reached the castle in the Tree of the Sun.
"I will try now," said the third brother. "I have a keen nose."
Now, that was not a very elegant expression, but it was his way, and we must take him as he was. He had a cheerful temper, and was, besides, a real poet. He could make many things appear poetical by the way in which he spoke of them, and ideas struck him long before they occurred to the minds of others.
"I can smell,"
he would say, and he attributed to the sense of smelling, which he possessed in a high degree, a great power in the region of the beautiful.
"I can smell,"
he would say,
"and many places are fragrant or beautiful according to the taste of the frequenters. One man feels at home in the atmosphere of the tavern among the flaring tallow candles, and when the smell of spirits mingles with the fumes of bad tobacco. Another prefers sitting amidst the overpowering scent of jasmine, or perfuming himself with scented olive oil. This man seeks the fresh sea breeze, while the one that climbs the lofty mountain top to look down upon the busy life in miniature beneath him."
As he spoke in this way, it seemed as if he had already been out in the world, as if he had already known and associated with man. But this experience was intuitive. It was the poetry within him, a gift from heaven bestowed on him in his cradle. He bade farewell to his parental roof in the Tree of the Sun, and departed on foot from the pleasant scenes that surrounded his home. Arrived at its confines, he mounted on the back of an ostrich, which runs faster than a horse, and afterwards, when he fell in with the wild swans, he swung himself on the strongest of them. For he loved change, and away he flew over the sea to distant lands, where there were great forests, deep lakes, lofty mountains, and proud cities. Wherever he came, it seemed as if sunshine traveled with him across the fields, for every flower, every bush, exhaled a renewed fragrance, as if conscious that a friend and protector was near, one who understood them and knew their value. The stunted rose bush shot forth twigs, unfolded its leaves, and bore the most beautiful roses. Everyone could see it, and even the black, slimy wood snail noticed its beauty.
"I will give my seal to the flower,"
said the snail.
"I have trailed my slime upon it. I can do no more." "Thus it always fares with the beautiful in this world,"
said the poet, and he made a song upon it, and sung it after his own fashion. But nobody listened. Then he gave a drummer 2 pence and a peacock's feather, and composed a song for the drum, and the drummer beat it through the streets of the town. And when the people heard it, they said, "That is a capital tune." The poet wrote many songs about the true, the beautiful, and the good. His songs were listened to in the tavern, where the tallow candles flared, in the fresh clover field, in the forest, and on the high seas, and it appeared as if this brother was to be more fortunate than the other two. But the evil spirit was angry at this, so he set to work with soot and incense, which he can mix so artfully as to confuse an angel, and how much more easily a poor poet. The evil one knew how to manage such people. He so completely surrounded the poet with incense that the man lost his head, forgot his mission and his home, and at last lost himself and vanished in the smoke. But when the little birds heard of it, they mourned, and for 3 days they sang not one song. The black wood snail became blacker still, not for grief, but for envy.
"They should have offered me incense," he said, "for it was I who gave him the idea of the most famous of his songs, the drum song of the Way of the World. And it was I who spat at the rose. I can bring witness to that fact."
But no tidings of all this reached the poet's home in India. The birds had all been silent for 3 days, and when the time of mourning was over, so deep had been their grief that they had forgotten for whom they wept. Such is the way of the world.
"Now I must go out into the world and disappear like the rest,"
said the fourth brother. He was as good-tempered as the third, but no poet, though he could be witty. The two eldest had filled the castle with joyfulness, and now the last brightness was going away. Sight and hearing have always been considered two of the chief senses among men, and those which they wish to keep bright. The other senses are looked upon as of less importance. But the younger son had a very different opinion. He had cultivated his taste in every way, and taste is very powerful. It rules over what goes into the mouth, as well as over all which is presented to the mind, and, consequently, this brother took upon himself to taste everything stored up in bottles or jars. This he called the rough part of his work. Every man's mind was to him as a vessel in which something was concocting, every land a kind of mental kitchen.
"There are no delicacies here," he said, so he wished to go out into the world to find something delicate to suit his taste. "Perhaps fortune may be more favorable to me than it was to my brothers. I shall start on my travels, but what conveyance shall I choose? Are air balloons invented yet?"
he asked of his father, who knew of all inventions that had been made, or would be made. Air balloons had not then been invented, nor steamships, nor railways.
"Good," said he. "Then I shall choose an air balloon. My father knows how they are to be made and guided. Nobody has invented one yet, and the people will believe that this is an aerial phantom. When I have done with the balloon, I shall burn it, and for this purpose you must give me a few pieces of another invention which will come next. By that I mean a few chemical matches."
He obtained what he wanted and flew away. The birds accompanied him farther than they had the other brothers. They were curious to know how this flight would end. Many more of them came swooping down. They thought it must be some new bird, and he soon had a goodly company of followers. They came in clouds till the air became darkened with birds, as it was with a cloud of locusts over the land of Egypt. And now he was out in the wide world. The balloon ascended over one of the greatest cities, and the aeronaut took up his station at the highest point on the church steeple. The balloon rose again into the air, which it ought not to have done. What became of it is not known, neither is it of any consequence, for balloons had not then been invented. There he sat on the church steeple. The birds no longer hovered over him. They had gotten tired of him, and he was tired of them. All of the chimneys in the town were smoking. "There are altars erected to my honor," said the wind, who wished to say something agreeable to him as he sat there boldly looking down upon the people in the street. There was one stepping along, proud of his purse, another of the key he carried behind him, though he had nothing to lock up. Another took pride in his moth-eaten coat, and another in his mortified body.
"Vanity! All vanity!" he exclaimed. "I must go down there by and by and touch and taste, but I shall sit here a little while longer, for the wind blows pleasantly at my back. I shall remain here as long as the wind blows and enjoy a little rest. It is comfortable to sleep late in the morning when one has a great deal to do," said the sluggard. "So I shall stop here as long as the wind blows, for it pleases me."
And there he stayed. But as he was sitting on the weathercock of the steeple, which kept turning round and round with him, he was under the false impression that the same wind still blew, and that he could stay there where he was without expense. But in India, in the castle on the Tree of the Sun, all was solitary and still, since the brothers had gone away, one after the other. "Nothing goes well with them," said the father. "They will never bring the glittering jewel home. It is not made for me. They are all dead and gone." Then he bent down over the book of truth and gazed down on the page on which he should have read of the life after death, but for him there was nothing to be read or learned upon it. His blind daughter was his consolation and joy. She clung to him with sincere affection, and for the sake of his happiness and peace, she wished the costly jewel could be found and brought home. With longing tenderness, she thought of her brothers. Where were they? Where did they live? How she wished she might dream of them, but it was strange that not even in dreams could she be brought near to them. But at last, one night, she dreamt that she heard the voices of her brothers calling to her from the distant world, and she could not refrain herself, but went out to them, and yet it seemed in her dream that she still remained in her father's house. She did not see her brothers, but she felt, as if it were a fire burning in her hand, which, however, did not hurt her, for it was the jewel she was bringing to her father. When she awoke, she thought for a moment that she still held the stone, but she only grasped the knob of her distaff. During the long evenings she had spun constantly, and round the distaff were woven threads finer than the web of a spider. Human eyes could never have distinguished these threads when separated from each other, but she had wetted them with her tears, and the twist was as strong as a cable. She rose with the impression that her dream must be a reality, and her resolution was taken. It was still night, and her father slept. She pressed a kiss upon his hand, and then took her distaff and fastened the end of the thread to her father's house. But for this, blind as she was, she would never have found her way home again. To this thread she must hold fast, and trust not to others or even to herself. From the Tree of the Sun she broke 4 leaves, which she gave up to the wind and the weather, that they might be carried to her brothers as letters and a greeting, in case she did not meet them in the wide world. Poor blind child! What would become of her in those distant regions? But she had the invisible thread, to which she could hold fast, and she possessed a gift which all the others lacked. This was a determination to throw herself entirely into whatever she undertook, and it made her feel as if she had eyes even at the tips of her fingers and could hear down into her very heart. Quietly she went forth into the noisy, bustling, wonderful world, and wherever she went the skies grew bright, and she felt the warm sunbeam, and a rainbow above in the blue heavens seemed to span the dark world. She heard the song of the birds, and smelt the scent of the orange groves and apple orchards so strongly that she seemed to taste it. Soft tones and charming songs reached her ear, as well as harsh sounds and rough words. Thoughts and opinions, in a strange contradiction to each other. Into the deepest recess of her heart penetrated the echoes of human thoughts and feelings. Now she heard the following words, sadly sung. Life is a shadow that flits away in a night of darkness and woe. But then would follow brighter thoughts. Life has the rose's sweet perfume, with sunshine, light, and joy. And if one stanza sounded painfully, such as, "Each mortal thinks of himself alone," is a truth, alas, too clearly known. Then on the other hand came the answer. Love, like a mighty flowing stream, fills every heart with its radiant gleam. She heard indeed such words as these. In the pretty turmoil here below, all is vain and paltry show. But also there came words of comfort. Great and good are the actions done by many whose worth is never known. And if sometimes the mocking strain reached her, why not join in the jesting cry that contemns all gifts from the throne on high? In the blind girl's heart a stronger voice repeated, "To trust in thyself, and God is best, in his holy will forever to rest." But the evil spirit could not see this and remained contented. He has more cleverness than 10,000 men, and he found means to compass his end. He betook himself to the marsh and collected a few little bubbles of stagnant water. Then he uttered over them the echoes of lying words, that they might become strong. He mixed up together songs of praise with lying epitaphs, as many as he could find, boiled them in tears shed by envy, put upon them rouge which he had scraped from faded cheeks, and from these he produced a maiden, in form and appearance like the blind girl, the angel of completeness, as men called her. The evil one's plot was successful. The world knew not which was the true, and indeed, how should the world know? To trust in thyself, and God is best, in his holy will forever to rest. So sung the blind girl in full faith. She had entrusted the 4 green leaves from the tree of the sun to the winds as letters of greeting to her brothers, and she had full confidence that the leaves would reach them. She fully believed that the jewel which outshines all the glories of the world would yet be found, and that upon the forehead of humanity it would glitter, even in the castle of her father.
"Even in my father's house," she repeated. "Yes, the place in which this jewel is to be found is earth, and I shall bring more than the promise of it with me. I feel it glow and swell more and more in my closed hand. Every grain of truth which the keen wind carried up and whirled towards me, I caught and treasured. I allowed it to be penetrated with the fragrance of the beautiful, of which there is so much in the world, even for the blind. I took the beatings of a heart engaged in a good action and added them to my treasure. All that I can bring is but dust. Still, it is part of the jewel we seek, and there is plenty. My hand is quite full of it."
She soon found herself again at home, carried thither in a flight of thought, never having loosened her hold of the invisible thread fastened to her father's house. As she stretched out her hand to her father, the powers of evil dashed with the fury of a hurricane over the tree of the sun. A blast of wind rushed through the open doors and into the sanctuary, where lay the Book of Truth. "It will be blown to dust by the wind," said the father, as he seized the open hand she held towards him.
"No,"
she replied with quiet confidence.
"it is indestructible. I feel its beam warming my very soul."
Then her father observed that a dazzling flame gleamed from the white page on which the shining dust had passed from her hand. It was there to prove the certainty of eternal life, and on the book glowed one shining word, and only one. The word? Believe. And soon the 4 brothers were again with the father and daughter. When the green leaf from home fell on the bosom of each, a longing had seized them to return. They had arrived, accompanied by the birds of passage, the stag, the antelope, and all the creatures of the forest who wished to take part in their joy. We have often seen, when a sunbeam bursts through a crack in the door into a dusty room, how a whirling column of dust seems to circle round. But this was not poor, insignificant, common dust which the blind girl had brought. Even the rainbow's colors are dim when compared with the beauty which shone from the page on which it had fallen. The beaming word, believe, from every grain of truth, had the brightness of the beautiful and the good, more bright than the mighty pillar of flame that led Moses and the children of Israel to the land of Canaan. And from the word believe arose the bridge of hope, reaching even to the unmeasurable love in the realms of the infinite. The Story of the Wind. Near the shores of the Great Belt, which is one of the straits that connect the Kattegat with the Baltic, stands an old mansion with thick red walls. "I know every stone of it," says the wind. "I saw it when it was part of the castle of Mark Stig on the promontory. But the castle was obliged to be pulled down, and the stone was used again for the walls of a new mansion on another spot, the baronial residence of Borreby, which still stands near the coast. I knew them well, those noble lords and ladies, the successive generations that dwelt there. And now I'm going to tell you of Waldemar Daa and his daughters. How proud was his bearing, for he was of royal blood, and could boast of more noble deeds than merely hunting the stag and emptying the wine-cup. His rule was despotic. 'It shall be,' he was accustomed to say. His wife, in garments embroidered with gold, stepped proudly over the polished marble floors. The tapestries were gorgeous, and the furniture of costly and artistic taste. She had brought golden plate with her into the house. The cellars were full of wine. Black, fiery horses neighed in the stables. There was a look of wealth about the house of Borreby at that time. They had 3 children, daughters, fair and delicate maidens, Ida, Joanna, and Anna Dorothea. I have never forgotten their names. They were a rich, noble family, born in affluence and nurtured in luxury." Roared the wind and went on. "I did not see in this house, as in other great houses, the high-born lady sitting among her women, turning the spinning wheel. She could sweep the sounding chords of the guitar and sing to the music, not always Danish melodies, but the songs of a strange land. It was live and let live here. Stranger guests came from far and near. Music sounded, goblets clashed, and I," said the wind, "was not able to drown the noise. Ostentation, pride, splendor, and display ruled, but not the fear of the Lord. It was on the evening of the first day of May," the wind continued. "I came from the west, and had seen the ships overpowered with the waves, when all on board persisted or were cast shipwrecked on the coast of Jutland. I had hurried across the heath and over Jutland's wood-girt eastern coast, and over the island of Funen, and then I drove across the great belt, sighing and moaning. At length I lay down to rest on the shores of Zealand, near to the great house of Borreby, where the splendid forest of oaks still flourished. The young men of the neighborhood were collecting branches and brushwood under the oak trees. The largest and driest they could find they carried into the village and piled them up in a heap and set them on fire. Then the men and maidens danced and sung in a circle round the blazing pile. I lay quiet, said the wind, but I silently touched a branch which had been brought by one of the handsomest of the young men, and the wood blazed up brightly, blazed brighter than all the rest. Then he was chosen as the chief, and received the name of the shepherd, and might choose his lamb from among the maidens. There was a greater mirth and rejoicing than I had ever heard in the halls of the rich baronial house. Then the noble lady drove by towards the baron's mansion with her 3 daughters in a gilded carriage drawn by 6 horses. The daughters were young and beautiful, 3 charming blossoms, a rose, a lily, and a white hyacinth. The mother was a proud tulip, and never acknowledged the salutations of any of the men or maidens who paused in their sport to do her honor. The gracious lady seemed like a flower that was rather stiff in her stalk. Rose, lily, and hyacinth. Yes, I saw them, all 3. Whose little lambs will they one day become, thought I. Their shepherd will be a gallant knight, perhaps a prince. The carriage rolled on, and the peasants resumed their dancing. They drove about the summer through all the villages near, but one night, when I rose again, the high-born lady lay down to rise again no more. That thing came to her which comes to us all, in which there is nothing new. Waldemar Daa remained for a time silent and thoughtful. The loftiest tree may be bowed without being broken, said a voice within him. His daughters wept. All the people in the mansion wiped their eyes, but Lady Daa had driven away, and I drove away too, said the wind. I returned again. I often returned and passed over the island of Funen and the shores of the Belt. Then I rested by Borreby, near the glorious wood where the heron made his nest, the haunt of the wood pigeons, the bluebirds, and the black stork. It was yet spring. Some were sitting on their eggs. Others had already hatched their young broods. But how they fluttered about and cried out when the axe sounded through the forest, blow upon blow! The trees of the forest were doomed. Waldemar Daa wanted to build a noble ship, a man of war, a 3-decker, which the king would be sure to buy. And these, the trees of the wood, the landmark of the seamen, the refuge of the birds, must be felled. The hawk started up and flew away, for its nest was destroyed. The heron and all the birds of the forest became homeless and flew about in fear and anger. I could well understand how they felt. Crows and ravens croaked as if in scorn, while the trees were cracking and falling all around them. Far in the interior of the wood, where a noisy swarm of laborers were working, stood Waldemar Daa and his 3 daughters, and all were laughing at the wild cries of the birds, excepting one, the youngest, Anna Dorothea, who felt grieved to the heart. And when they made preparations to fell a tree that was almost dead, and on whose naked branches the black stork had built their nest, she saw the poor little things stretching out their necks, and begged for mercy for them, with the tears in her eyes. So the tree with the black stork's nest was left standing. The tree itself, however, was not worth much to speak of. Then there was a great deal of hewing and sawing, and at last the three-decker was built. The builder was a man of low origin, but possessing great pride. His eyes and forehead spoke of large intellect, and Waldemar Daa was fond of listening to him. And so was Waldemar's daughter, Ida, the eldest, now about 15 years old. And while he was building the ship for the father, he was building for himself a castle in the air, in which he and Ida were to live when they were married. This might have happened, indeed, if there had been a real castle, with stone walls, ramparts, and a moat. But in spite of his clever head, the builder was still but a poor, inferior bird. And how can a sparrow expect to be admitted into the society of peacocks? I passed on in my course, said the wind, and he passed away also. He was not allowed to remain, and little Ida got over it, because she was obliged to do so. Proud black horses, worth looking at, were neighing in the stable, and they were locked up, for the admiral, who had been sent by the king to inspect the new ship and make arrangements for its purchase, was loud in admiration of these beautiful horses. I heard it all, said the wind, for I accompanied the gentleman through the open door of the stable, and strewed stalks of straw like bars of gold at their feet. Waldemar Daa wanted gold, and the admiral wished for the proud black horses, therefore he praised them so much. But the hint was not taken, and consequently the ship was not bought. It remained on the shore, covered with boards, a Noah's Ark that never got to the water, and that was a pity. In the winter, when the fields were covered with snow, and the water filled the large blocks of ice which I had blown up to the coast, continued the wind, great flocks of crows and ravens, dark and black as they usually are, came and alighted on the lonely, deserted ship. Then they croaked in harsh accents of the forest that now existed no more, of the many pretty birds' nests destroyed, and the little ones left without a home, and all for the sake of that great bit of lumber, that proud ship that never sailed forth. I made the snowflakes whirl till the snow lay like a great lake around the ship and drifted over it. I let it hear my voice, that it might know what the storm has to say. Certainly I did my part towards teaching it seamanship. That winter passed away, and another winter and summer both passed, as they are still passing away, even as I pass away. The snow drifts onwards, the apple blossoms are scattered, the leaves fall. Everything passes away, and men are passing away too. But the great man's daughters are still young, and little Ida is a rose as fair to look upon as the day when the shipbuilder first saw her. I often tumbled her long brown hair while she stood in the garden by the apple tree, musing and not heeding how I strewed the blossoms on her hair and dishevelled it. Or sometimes, while she stood gazing at the red sun and the golden sky through the opening branches of the dark, thick foliage of the garden trees. Her sister Joanna was bright and slender as a lily. She had a tall and lofty carriage and figure, though like her mother, rather stiff in the back. She was very fond of walking through the great hall where hung the portraits of her ancestors. The women were represented in dresses of velvet and silk, with tiny little hats embroidered with pearls on their braided hair. They were all handsome women. The gentlemen appeared clad in steel or in rich cloaks lined with squirrel's fur. They wore little ruffs and swords at their sides. Where would Joanna's place be on that wall some day? And how would he look, her noble lord and husband? This is what she thought of and often spoke of in a low voice to herself. I heard it as I swept into the long hall and turned round to come out again. Anna Dorothea, the pale hyacinth, a child of 14, was quiet and thoughtful. Her large, deep blue eyes had a dreamy look, but a childlike smile still played round her mouth. I was not able to blow it away, neither did I wish to do so. We have met in the garden, in the hollow lane, in the field and meadow, where she gathered herbs and flowers which she knew would be useful to her father in preparing the drugs and mixtures he was always concocting. Waldemar Daa was arrogant and proud, but he was also a learned man and knew a great deal. It was no secret, and many opinions were expressed on what he did. In his fireplace there was a fire, even in the summertime. He would lock himself in his room, and for days the fire would be kept burning, but he did not talk much of what he was doing. The secret powers of nature are generally discovered in solitude, and did he not soon expect to find out the art of making the greatest of all good things? The art of making gold? So he fondly hoped. Therefore, the chimney smoked and the fire cracked so constantly. Yes, I was there too, said the wind. Leave it alone, I sang down the chimney. Leave it alone. It will all end in smoke, air, coals and ashes, and you will burn your fingers. But Mr. Waldemar Daa did not leave it alone, and all he possessed vanished like smoke blown by me. The splendid black horses, where are they? What became of the cows in the field? The old gold and silver vessels in cupboards and chests, and even the house and home itself? It was easy to melt all these away in the gold-making crucible, and yet obtain no gold. And so it was. Empty are the bars and storerooms, the cellars and cupboards. The servants decreased in number, and the mice multiplied. First one window became broken, and then another, so that I could get in at the other places besides the door. Where the chimney smokes, the meal is being cooked, says the proverb. But here a chimney smoked that devoured all the meals for the sake of gold. I blew round the courtyard, said the wind, like a watchman blowing his home, but no watchman was there. I twirled the weathercock round on the summit of the tower, and it creaked like the snoring of a warder, but no warder was there. Nothing but mice and rats. Poverty laid the tablecloth. Poverty sat in the wardrobe and in the larder. The door fell off of its hinges. Cracks and fissures made their appearance everywhere, so that I could go in and out at pleasure. And that is how I know all about it. Amid smoke and ashes, sorrow and sleepless nights, the hair and beard of the master of the house turned gray, and deep furrows showed themselves around his temples. His skin turned pale and yellow, while his eyes still looked eagerly for gold. They longed for gold, and the result of his labor was debt instead of gain. I blew the smoke and ashes into his face and beard. I moaned through the broken window panes and the yawning clefts in the walls. I blew into the chests and drawers belonging to his daughters, wherein lay the clothes that had become faded and threadbare from being worn over and over. Such a song had not been sung at the children's cradle as I sung now. The lordly life had changed to a life of penury. I was the only one who rejoiced aloud in that castle, said the wind. At last I snowed them up, and they say snow keeps people warm. It was good for them, for they had no wood, and the forest from which they might have obtained it had been cut down. The frost was very bitter, and I rushed through loopholes and passages, over gables and roofs with keen and cutting swiftness. The 3 high-born daughters were lying in bed because of the cold, and their father crouching beneath his leather coverlet. Nothing to eat, nothing to burn, no fire in the hearth. Here was life for high-born people. Give it up, give it up. But my Lord Da would not do that. After winter, spring will come, he said. After want, good times. We must not lose patience. We must learn to wait. Now my horses and lands are all mortgaged. It is indeed high time, but gold will come at last, at Easter. I heard him as he thus spoke. He was looking at a spider's web, and he continued, Thou cunning little weaver, thou dost teach me perseverance. Let anyone tear thy web, and thou wilt begin again and repair it. Let it be entirely destroyed, thou wilt resolutely begin to make another till it is completed. So ought we to do, if we wish to succeed at last. It was the morning of Easter Day. The bells sounded from the neighboring church, and the sun seemed to rejoice in the sky. The master of the castle had watched through the night in feverish excitement, and had been melting and cooling, distilling and mixing. I heard him sighing like a soul in despair. I heard him praying, and I noticed how he held his breath. The lamp burnt out, but he did not observe it. I blew up the fire in the coals on the hearth, and it threw a red glow on his ghastly white face, lighting it up with a glare, while his sunken eyes looked out wildly from their cavernous depths, and appeared to grow larger and more prominent, as if they would burst from their sockets. Look at the alchemic glass, he cried. Something glows in the crucible, pure and heavy. He lifted it with a trembling hand and exclaimed in a voice of agitation, Gold! Gold! He was quite giddy. I could have blown him down, said the wind. But I only fanned the glowing coals and accompanied him through the door to the room where his daughter sat shivering. His coat was powdered with ashes, and there were ashes in his beard and in his tangled hair. He stood erect and held high in the air the brittle glass that contained his costly treasure. "Found! Found! Gold! Gold!" he shouted, again holding the glass aloft that it might flash in the sunshine. But his hand trembled, and the alchemic glass fell from it, clattering to the ground, and brake in 1,000 pieces. The last bubble of his happiness had burst with a whiz and a whir, and rushed away from the gold maker's house. Late in the autumn, when the days were short, and the mist-sprinkled cold drops on the berries and the leafless branches, I came back in fresh spirits, rushed through the air, swept the sky clear, and snapped off the dry twigs, which is certainly no great labor to do, yet it must be done. There was another kind of sweeping taking place at Waldemar Dawes in the castle of Borreby. His enemy, O. Ramel of Vasnas, was there with the mortgage of the house and everything it contained in his pocket. I rattled the broken windows, beat against the old rotten doors, and whistled through the cracks and crevices, so that Mr. O. Ramel did not much like to remain there. Ida and Anna Dorothea wept bitterly. Joanna stood, pale and proud, biting her lip till the blood came, but what could that avail? O. Ramel offered Waldemar Daa permission to remain in the house till the end of his life. No one thanked him for the offer, and I saw the ruined old gentleman lift his head and throw it back more proudly than ever. Then I rushed against the house and the old lime trees with such force that one of the thickest branches, a decayed one, was broken off, and the branch fell at the entrance and remained there. It might have been used as a broom if anyone had wanted to sweep the place out. And a grand sweeping out there really was. I thought it would be so. It was hard for anyone to preserve composure on such a day, but these people had strong wills, as unbending as their hard fortune. There was nothing they could call their own, excepting the clothes they wore. Yes, there was one more thing, an alchemist's glass, a new one which had been lately bought and filled with what could be gathered from the ground of the treasure which had promised so much, but failed in keeping its promise. Waldemar Daa hid the glass in his bosom, and, taking his stick in his hand, the once rich gentleman passed with his daughters out of the house of Borreby. I blew coldly upon his flustered cheeks. I stroked his gray beard and his long white hair, and I sang as well as I was able. "Gone away! Gone away!" Ida walked on one side of the old man, and Anna Dorothea on the other. Joanna turned round as they left the entrance. Why? Fortune would not turn because she turned. She looked at the stone in the walls which had once formed part of the castle of Mark Stig, and perhaps she thought of his daughters and of the old song. The eldest and youngest, hand in hand, went forth alone to a distant land. These were only two. Here there were three, and their father with them also. They walked along the high road, where once they had driven in their splendid carriage. They went forth with their father as beggars. They wandered across an open field to a mud hut, which they rented for $1.50 a year. a new home with bare walls and empty cupboards. Crows and magpies fluttered about them and cried as if in contempt. "Caw! Caw! Turned out of our nest! Caw! Caw!" as they had done in the woods at Borreby when the trees were felled. Da and his daughters could not help hearing it, so I blew about their ears to drown the noise. What use was it that they should listen? So they went to live in the mud hut in the open field, and I wandered away over moor and meadow, through bare bushes and leafless forests, to the open sea, to the broad shores and other lands. Away, away, year after year. And what became of Waldemar Daa and his daughters? Listen, the wind will tell us. The last I saw of them was the pale hyacinth, Anna Dorothea. She was old and bent then, for 50 years had passed, and she had outlived them all. She could relate the history. Yonder on the heath, near the town of Wyborg in Jutland, stood the fine new house of the canon. It was built of red brick with projecting gables. It was inhabited, for the smoke curled up thickly from the chimneys. The canon's gentle lady and her beautiful daughters sat in the bay window and looked over the hawthorn hedge of the garden towards the brown heath. What were they looking at? Their glances fell upon a stork's nest, which was built upon an old tumble-down hut. The roof, as far as one existed at all, was covered with moss and lichen. The stork's nest covered the greater part of it, and that alone was in a good condition, for it was kept in order by the stork himself. That is a house to be looked at, not to be touched, said the wind. For the sake of the stork's nest, it had been allowed to remain, although it is a blot on the landscape. They did not like to drive the stork away, therefore the old shed was left standing, and the poor woman who dwelt in it allowed to stay. She had the Egyptian bird to thank for that, or was it perchance her reward for having once interceded for the preservation of the nest of its black brother in the forest of Borreby? At that time, she, the poor woman, was a young child, a white hyacinth in a rich garden. She remembered that time well, for it was Anna Dorothea. "Oh, oh, oh," she sighed, for people can sigh like the moaning of the wind among the reeds and rushes. "Oh, oh," she would say, "no bell sounded at thy burial, Waldemar Daa." The poor schoolboys did not even sing a psalm when the former lord of Borreby was laid in the earth to rest. "Oh, everything has an end, even misery," she said. "Sister Ida became the wife of a peasant. That was the hardest trial which befell our father, that the husband of his own daughter should be a miserable serf, whom his owner could place for punishment on the wooden horse. I suppose he is underground now. And Ida, alas, it is not ended yet, miserable that I am. Kind heaven, grant me that I may die." That was Anna Dorothea's prayer in the wretched hut that was left standing for the sake of the stork. "I took pity on the proudest of the sisters," said the wind. "Her courage was like that of a man, and in man's clothes she served as a sailor on board ship. She was of few words and of a dark countenance, but she did not know how to climb, so I blew her overboard before anyone found out that she was a woman, and in my opinion that was well done," said the wind. On such another Easter morning as that on which Waldemar Daa imagined he had discovered the art of making gold, I heard the tones of a psalm under the stork's nest and within the crumbling walls. It was Anna Dorothea's last song. There was no window in the hut, only a hole in the wall, and the sun rose like a globe of burnished gold and looked through. With that splendor he filled that dismal dwelling. Her eyes were glazing and her heart breaking, but so it would have been, even had the sun not shone that morning on Anna Dorothea. The stork's nest had secured her home till her death. I sung over her grave. I sung at her father's grave. I know where it lies, and where her grave is too, but nobody else knows it. New times now. All has changed. The old high road is lost amid cultivated fields. The new one now winds along over covered graves, and soon the railway will come, with its train of carriages, and rush over graves where lie those whose very names are forgotten. All past, passed away. This is the story of Waldemar Daa and his daughters. Tell it better, any of you, if you know how," said the wind, and he rushed away and was gone.
Like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe.
Like this video, share this channel to your social media and with your friends and family, and have them subscribe. You subscribe as well. Take care of yourselves. We hope you've enjoyed this. Sweet dreams.